the air tonight with the U.S. and Russia talking about the possibility maybe of even more prisoner swaps after Brittany Griner's release. The reaction we're just getting from the Biden administration on where they stand on working with Vladimir Putin. We'll also take you live to Texas, where Griner is recovering. Plus, a federal judge just in the last few minutes deciding on whether to hold lawyers for former President Trump in contempt. We'll take you inside the closed-door hearing with that developing news. And might we be looking at mandatory mask wearing yet again? With local officials talking and recommending, but not yet requiring masks. What doctors are saying about not just COVID, but this triple-demic. Then in our backstory, we're taking you behind the scenes of a new documentary looking at how far some people have to go to pay off student loan debt. Plus, if you're editing your IG photos with that new app, Lensa, we've got the latest on some of the privacy concerns being raised you're going to want to know about. That's a little bit later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and we're coming on the air with some new reporting and some new reaction from the Biden administration after Russia's Vladimir Putin is saying that maybe there could be even more prisoner swaps with the U.S. on the horizon, as doctors are now checking here at home on how Brittany Griner's doing now that she is finally back in America. And when it comes to Paul Whelan, the other U.S. citizen now being wrongfully held in Russia, the State Department spokesperson is telling me late today there is a negotiation channel that exists. Watch. Would you agree with that assessment that there are active discussions around getting Paul Whelan out? Is that how you'd characterize it?
It's not often that you'll hear me say this, but we do agree with Vladimir Putin in the sense that there will be discussions going forward regarding how we are going to get Paul Whelan reunited with his family back here in the United States. A plane will be coming for Paul Whelan. We're going to bring him home just as soon as we can.
That's as Putin today is telling reporters Russia would be down to do more of these kinds of prisoner exchanges, like the one we've just seen with Griner and Viktor Bout, saying everything is possible. With those comments from him coming after this moment. Look at this. Griner and her family and supporters have been waiting for it for months. She's home, right? She's now at that very specialized hospital for people who have gone through trauma in San Antonio. So in her home country, not quite back at her house. Viktor Bout had his own homecoming today in Russia. Flowers, hugs, embraces from his wife and his mom, with his return now opening up questions about what it means that he is free once again. Remember, this is somebody who was one of the most prolific arms dealers in the world, known as the Merchant of Death, who's conspired to kill Americans. We're going to get to what's next for Griner in Texas with Marissa Pera in a minute. But let's start at the White House with our own Monica Alba. So, Mon, bring us up to speed of this idea of Putin saying, you know, we can negotiate for more releases. There are channels that are going to be opening up, as you heard Ned Price tell me not too long ago. How does this actually work? Because the trillion-dollar question seems to be fine. They want to get Paul Whelan out. That is very clear. What is the mechanism for that to actually happen?
And what is the leverage, right, Hallie? I think that's exactly the question here that senior administration officials are asking. And they're trying to make very clear that this is a different situation than what was presented with Brittany Griner, because Russians put Paul Whelan in this espionage category. They allege that he is a U.S. spy, something he has continually dismissed and said that is not true. But the U.S. here is saying if Russia then wants somebody on that level, is there even a Russian spy in U.S. custody who the Russians would accept? And they're looking and saying there's no one obvious. So then it raises this question about, okay, what about other Russians held elsewhere in other custody? For instance, there is a Russian assassin convicted of murder who's currently held in Germany that the Russians had expressed interest in perhaps getting released. But then you're talking about different countries, a multinational swap, and that's something the U.S. has already said months ago they were not considering. But does that shift now? So in my conversation today with the officials who were part of these discussions, they said, look, we don't think this is going to proceed the same way it did with Brittany Griner. We are potentially going to have to pursue other avenues. What those are is unclear, but the big takeaway was we're not going to do this in the press and we're not going to do it in the public eye because we think we'll be more successful if we do keep this to the back channels. And I'm told they were encouraged, as you saw the spokesman Ned Price say there, but by what they heard from President Putin, which is not something you hear a lot from American officials.
That's right. We don't hear that from Putin. We certainly don't hear, you know, the State Department saying, as Ned pointed out, you know, that we agree with Putin here. There's just two questions on Viktor Bout, though, Mon, right? One is, and I put this to Price also, can you be certain that he is not going to be a dangerous person again now that he is a free man walking in Russia? He's 55 years old. Yes, he's been in prison for more than a decade here. And I think the argument is, well, those relationships have fallen apart. He doesn't have a business anymore, et cetera. there's sort of the question of what danger might he pose to U.S. national security. And then there's this other question around Booth that is, if he's home now, you see him hugging his family members there. As you talk about the leverage, there's this guy being held in Germany, somebody whose name had been floated a couple of months ago. Who else is out there, right? This idea of if Boot is now free, if Boot is off the table because of the Brittany Griner one-for-one prisoner exchange, is the only option now some kind of a multinational deal, right, involving not just the U.S. and Russia, but other countries. That's something that I think administration officials have been, at least publicly, pretty cagey about.
Exactly, because it would be so much more complicated. And anytime you're talking about a different country, they're saying we can't speak for what Germany would do, for instance. But they're not even coming forward and saying that those conversations have been renewed. We knew those conversations actually initially were floated all the way back in July. So it is something that had been in the water. But to your question about can the U.S. be certain that Victor Bout isn't going to go back to his old ways and earn that nickname again of being the merchant of death? No. The short answer is there's no way to be sure of that. But the U.S. did conduct a national security assessment before agreeing to this. And ultimately, they said, hey, it's worth taking the risk, because when there's an opportunity on the table to bring any American home, you have to take it. That's essentially what President Biden was up against here. And he said he wrestled with it, that it was very difficult, that it was one he felt of a moral obligation to bring Brittany Griner home. But he did so with a lot of angst because he knew it meant leaving Paul Whelan behind. And they are just still searching for a path forward on that. Is it going to involve other countries? Could it even involve something other than a prisoner exchange? Is there something else that President Putin could put on the table and could want with the ongoing war in Ukraine and Russia advancing there, they think potentially in the winter, if that's something that shifts? Who knows? So that's also a part of the conversation. They're not ruling out what exactly could be a more traditional prisoner exchange, but they're also not talking specifically about who would be at play. Hallie.
Monica Alba, live for us. That's there. She's outside the White House. Monica, thank you very much. Let's talk about what's going down in Texas, right? Because administration officials say that when Griner got back to the U.S., she's in Texas now, she was in good spirits. She seemed to be in good health, but they want to make sure, right? That's why she's doing these checks. That's why she's having a medical evaluation. The priority right now, according to the State Department, is to make sure that Griner's well-being is prioritized along with her family's. Let me bring in now Marissa Parra, who is there in San Antonio. This is a medical facility, Marissa, where Trevor Reed went to when he was released from Russia this year. I've talked to him, to Trevor Reed, about that process, right? The idea that there is treatment, that there is kind of this decompression period for people who have been through these incredibly intense moments. Talk through what the expectation is for Griner over the next few days, the next few weeks.
Right. Well, just to set a little bit of context here, the Brooke Army Medical Center really is the premier place to send people who have been through this sort of ordeal. To your point, Bo Bergdahl, 2014, held captive by Taliban allies and was sent here right after he was released. And then we had Trevor Reed earlier this year sent here after he was released from Russian detainment. And so obviously the process, they have sort of a guidebook of the protocol that they follow, but that is going to be adjusted. There's a little bit of flexibility depending on the case. In Trevor Reed's case, there were some health issues that they needed to address, but Brittany Griner seen walking off of the plane there with a little pep in her step. By all accounts, for people who were on the ground with her this morning, it sounds like she appears to be healthy and, like you said, appears to be in good spirits. So she's not only getting that physical evaluation, Hallie, but she's also getting a comprehensive psychological evaluation. And obviously that is something that is going to manifest in a very different way. It's a little bit harder to spot, a little bit harder to treat. And I was flipping through some of the pages of the protocol. They don't share all of it, of course, but they did share dozens and dozens of pages of what we could see, which is just specific rules and protocol to really aid with that process of decompression and then reintegration.
And that reintegration, there's a question mark on that. I was speaking with one of Griner's friends or former coaches, who were saying, hey, is she going to play basketball again? Like, maybe, right? But this former coach told me, but that's going to be up to Griner. And that is probably a ways down the road once because she's not even, she's home, meaning in the U.S. She's not home in the place there she lived, you know what I mean, with her wife and with her family. Yeah, she's like not really home yet. It's going to take a minute.
Right, exactly. I mean, we know that she was finally reunited with her wife. That happened behind closed doors, no doubt an emotional moment between the two of them. But one thing that I want to make clear is regardless of what the future holds, especially when it comes to basketball, right? That's a big question people are asking is what does the future hold for her personally, professionally? Her wife, Sherelle, yesterday really made a point to say that in terms of what they're going to be doing together, they're pledging their support, their platform to really aid in the process of trying to bring home folks like Paul Whelan, bring other folks who are detained overseas home, and doing what they can to support that.
Marissa Parr, thank you very much. Live for us there in San Antonio. Appreciate it. We will obviously stay all over this story. We want to get you to some other news that is just breaking before we came on the air tonight. A federal judge deciding not to hold Trump attorneys in contempt, basically rejecting a request from the Justice Department to do this because those lawyers didn't comply with the subpoena back in May to hand back documents marked as classified that the former president had in his possession. A spokesperson for Mr. Trump saying in a statement, the president and his counsel will continue to be transparent and cooperative, even in the face of what the spokesperson called the highly weaponized and corrupt witch hunt from the DOJ. That is language we have heard from the Trump team before. The Department of Justice has no comment as this news, again, just breaking in the last couple of minutes or so. Ken Dilanian is joining us now. So what was interesting, it's not like we could watch this go down. This was behind closed doors. NBC News was part of a coalition of outlets that had sought to make this public, right, that had sought to have access to it. Talk about what happened today, why this matters here. It all centers around this kind of hot potato, right?
Yes.
Like, will these Trump attorneys sign a document saying, yes, we've given everything back? It seems like people don't want to do that.
And we have to be a little careful because there's a lot we don't know. But what we're able to report is that the judge did not grant the Justice Department's request to hold the Trump team, the Trump office of the former president, in contempt of court for noncompliance with the subpoena. We don't know what other conditions she may have imposed, but it feels like she's telling this two sides to figure it out among themselves. This whole thing, I got to say, Hallie, is perplexing to me because it seems like, you know, I've never seen this before where the government has a search warrant in a case with probable cause to believe a crime has been committed to find some classified documents. But then in another context, they're asking a judge for a contempt order. As you know, apparently they still think there are classified documents out there. They have an existing grand jury subpoena, but I guess they don't have enough evidence to go do another search. I mean,
that's what's confusing to you, is if they thought there was still more stuff out there. Could this be just punitive, though? Could this be just an instance from the DOJ where they feel like, hey, you didn't tell us the whole truth, and now we're gonna ask the judge for this?
Yeah, but in a situation where you've already done a search, you know, normally in a case like this, you would indict the defendant. If you thought the defendant was still withholding classified information and you already had evidence that they improperly took classified information to their home, you wouldn't be, you know, messing around with a judge in front of a grand jury. It's very perplexing. It suggests that the Justice Department has not been able to connect Donald Trump personally to these documents.
So this was my next question for you, which is what is the implication for the former president himself here? Because as you rightly note, what was involved today was not him himself. It was sort of the office of the former president.
Right. And they're trying to get, as you alluded to, they're trying to get the lawyers to certify that, in fact, all the documents have been turned over. And for reasons that are obvious to both of us, none of the lawyers appear willing to do that, because how would they possibly know? And Trump has a history of not being straight with the people who work for him. But it's also true that in many of these cases, as we talked about the Mueller situation, the Trump Organization case, Trump's distance from the actions that are taken on his behalf have saved him in these investigations.
Ken Dilanian, thank you for being all over it for us. I know it's been an afternoon of working the phones, working your sources, so appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks.
Some new comments tonight from Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema after her pretty surprising switcheroo, trying to reassure voters and explain why she decided to leave the Democratic Party to become an independent. Here she is.
I will not be a part of what I consider to be an escalating tit for tat, the angry rhetoric, the desire to get one over on the other party, the desire to punish each other. Everyone knows I don't function like that.
So she is no longer going to be a Democrat. She will be an independent. You're like, okay, well, what does this mean for the Senate, right? This next coming Congress. Not like a whole ton, not gonna have a major impact. Democrats will still be able to have control of committees. They will still be able to do what they need to do as far as confirming judges, judicial nominees, et cetera. 51-49 majority, but with 3 independents, along with Senators Bernie Sanders and Angus King, who vote with the Democrats. The bigger question, of course, is what this means for 2024. That's where this gets really interesting if Sinema does decide to run again. That's where the drama is on this front. Sahil Kapoor knows this well. He is joining us now. It is not like, if you've followed Kyrsten Sinema's career, which it is your job to follow her job, right? It's not like a totally shocking move. I think it's surprising for sure based on the timing, based on it's happening now, et cetera. But the expectation is, at least from what we've heard from Senator Chuck Schumer, she's still going to vote with Dems on the stuff that matters to be able to move through procedural red tape, right? So we can say sort of 51-49 Senate, reminding people as we did, there are 2 other independents in the Senate as well who caucus with Democrats. The question is 2024. She will, if she runs again, she is likely going to face a challenger here, Ruben Gallego, who is currently an Arizona congressman, who is confirming to our friends at Punchbowl News today that he is looking, right, at potentially putting together a committee to explore a senatorial run. Explain why that is so interesting, why Democrats are very concerned and sort of eyeballing that possibility really closely.
That's right, Hallie. To the first part, you're right that it's not really clear how much this changes the dynamic here in Washington. Yes, she's going to keep her committee assignments. And unless she suddenly decides to start voting differently and start, voting against her party on issues like nominations and judges, where she previously voted with President Biden, this may not have much of an impact at all in Washington. Where this really matters, where this is potentially a huge earthquake, is in the Arizona Senate race in 2024, because this raises the possibility of a 3-way fight for that Arizona Senate seat between a Democratic candidate. The state party has told me they will absolutely put up a candidate, that they're not going to back off and just support Kyrsten Sinema as an independent. And there will certainly be a Republican candidate as well. Now, the question is it going to be a 2-way between a Democrat and a Republican, in which case Sinema would bow out? She has not confirmed that she's actually running in 2024. But if she does run, that raises the prospect of a 3-way battle. And could Sinema pull more independent voters from the Democratic camp?
Yeah.
Of course, she's more ideologically aligned with them. That could be very difficult for the Democratic candidate to win, Hallie, because the formula in recent Arizona elections, Democrats have won 3 consecutively in the Senate and the presidential election in 2020. The formula has been overwhelming Democratic support and double-digit victories among independents.
And to be clear, Sahil, I want to put a really fine point on it. There are more registered independents than Democrats in Arizona, as Sinema herself has acknowledged. The concern is that if Sinema plus, let's say, Gallego plus TBD Republican is in this race, that effectively Democrats think Sinema and whoever could split that support from independents and Democrats and send a Republican to the Senate. That is what could affect the balance of power in 2024. That's what this is all about, right?
Exactly. And it comes in a Senate landscape that's already looking very challenging for Democrats. They're going to be defending 3 Senate seats in red states. They're going to be defending 5 Senate seats in purple states. Arizona is one of them. And yes, the reality is or there may be a lot of voters in Arizona who are registered independents, but most of them lean toward one party. And the Democratic-leaning independents there might be somewhat attracted to Sinema. She might pull a significant share of them, even if she comes in a distant third behind a Democrat and a Republican, and play spoiler in the race. Now, let's put up what the Arizona Democratic Party said, as part of their statement in reaction to Sinema's move to officially quit the party. The chair of the state party, Raquel Terán, says, as a party, we welcome independent voters and their perspective. Senator Sinema may now be registered as an independent, but she has shown she answers to corporations and billionaires, not Arizonans. Senator Sinema's party registration means nothing if she continues not to listen to her constituents, unquote. So that gives you a preview of how Arizona Democrats expect to run against her if she continues to stay in the political arena and on the ballot. And by the way, that also echoes what Congressman Ruben Gallego, a potential challenger to her, has saying, that she's in it for herself, that her base is corporations, according to him.
Sahil Kapoor, thank you. So might we be looking at the return of mask mandates sometime soon, not just because of COVID, but the so-called triple-demic? We don't know the answer to that just yet, but here's what we do know. That some local health officials are having the conversation about masking. Just today, we heard from the New York City Health Department recommending now that people do mask back up when they're indoors, in public, in crowded spaces outside. This is not a mandate. This is just a strong recommendation. But look what's going down out west in parts of California. Officials are considering making some new rules to try to help keep cases of COVID at bay. They say they could end up mandating masks indoors in public in the new year if more and more people continue to be hospitalized with COVID in places like LA and Sacramento County. And like I said, it really isn't just COVID. It's also RSV, that respiratory virus. It's the flu also, which we got to look at new numbers today telling us just how bad the flu is getting across the country. Look at your screen. You see the places in purple or dark red. They have very high levels of flu cases. There's a lot of purple and dark red on that map, folks. Gabe Gutierrez is covering all of this and joining us now. And Gabe, let's start with the flu piece of it, because nearly 26,000 people ended up in the hospital just last week because of the flu alone. We're hearing leaders now in public health in Washington state are recommending masking indoors with all of these illnesses. Are you hearing that when you talk to doctors, Gabe, and you've been on this beat for us for a long time now, are they now telling you that the mask conversation should be happening? Because what I heard earlier on in the pandemic, right, when the mask mandates were dropping was, but we're leaving the door open to tell people to mask up yet if we need to. Are we getting to that point?
Well, Hallie, look, the conversation is happening, but at least the doctors that I've spoken with do recognize that the idea of a mask mandate would probably be unpopular, but they are urging and recommending people do it. You just mentioned the New York City Health Department issuing that health advisory, which, as you correctly pointed out, is a recommendation, not a mandate. But the numbers are, growing in some cases quite a bit, especially with the flu. We got new CDC numbers out today that so far they've estimated this flu season more than 13 million illnesses. And here's the key, Hallie. More than 120,000 flu hospitalizations so far this year. Now, we're at the Yale New Haven Hospital. This is one of the hospitals which a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about RSV, that they were dealing with a lot of RSV patients in younger children. Now, many adults are coming in with flu. Their ICU, which we visited just today, they're at 100% capacity. Most days they are at capacity. And I spoke with one of their top officials here about what he thinks is so different this year. Take a listen.
We have 1,500 beds. 100 of those beds now are full of flu patients, and that's both between adults and pediatrics. In the pediatric cases, you've probably heard that RSV was a big virus over the last couple of weeks, and now it's becoming flu.
And Hallie, again, a few weeks ago, they were all talking about RSV here, and now it is the flu. And when I asked him, what do you tell people that say, respiratory illnesses are common every winter? What makes this year so different? And he says that sheer numbers they're seeing at this point. And in those new numbers from the CDC we got today, Hallie, about 25% of a flu test positivity rate. Just to give you some perspective, last year around this time, the flu positivity rate was less than 3%. It's now around 25%, and that is what has some public health officials concerned, not just here in the Northeast, but really across the country, and especially out west, Hallie.
Gabe Gutierrez live for us there, up there in Connecticut. Gabe, appreciate it. An explosive court filing in a high-profile South Carolina murder case to tell you about this evening, because state prosecutors, we've now learned, want to use more than 1 million pages of financial crime documents as evidence against former South Carolina attorney Alec Murdaugh. Murdaugh's been charged with the 2021 murder of his wife and son. He has pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors say the documents are relevant. They could provide a motive. They allege the financial crimes are, quote, in their words, inextricably linked to the murders. Sam Brock is joining us now. And Sam, Murdaugh was in court today. I understand that it was a shorter hearing or court proceeding here. But the defense made its arguments as to why it wants to hear the prosecution lay out a motive. Explain to us why this matters, what it was said, and sort of Murdaugh being in court.
Yeah, Lee, it was about an hour and a half long today, so relatively short. The defense offered its bill of particulars, which in common speak really means more information. They want the prosecution to lay out where it's going to take this case, because as you mentioned a second ago, there were some 1.2 million documents that were dumped related to allegedly 80-plus financial crimes. It's enough information to fill up an entire iPhone. And what defense attorneys were saying is, please tell us exactly where you're going so that we're not ambushed once we get into court, because we fail to see how financial crimes, whether that's the forgery that he's facing, money laundering, obtaining property under false pretenses, a host of other charges, how does that relate to the brutal murder of 2 family members? And what the prosecutors say, you see the lead prosecutor right there, is that it's all about timing and the fact that they are alleging Murdaugh had committed financial crimes over the course of a decade. It was a slow burn that had turned into a fire, Hallie, and that he was about to be exposed, first by a wrongful death lawsuit relating to a boat crash that led to the death of a young woman, that his financials were about to be pulled out in court, but also that his own law firm had identified misappropriations and had given him the deadline of the day that his wife and son were murdered to show where that $792,000 was. And lo and behold, that same day, Maggie and Paul are both killed. And so that's part of the prosecution's argument, but it does require some circumstantial evidence to get from point A to point B.
The defense also raised some questions about another big piece of evidence for the prosecution, which is blood on a shirt. What happened on that front?
Yeah, this was about the first 30 or 45 minutes of the hearing today, which is to say the defense said we want all communications related to the shirt which Alec Murdaugh was wearing the night of the murder. It was analyzed, and what the person who was retained by the state found initially was that there was no blood spatter on the shirt. Then he changed his mind after photoshopping portions of that shirt and evidence and said, yes, there is blood spatter. The shirt itself was destroyed by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Department, SLED. So they're basically saying we want to see all communications related to this, because if you're going to introduce this into court that there was blood on this man's shirt, but there was real questions initially as to whether or not it was human blood or even if there was blood on there in the first place. We want to know what the particulars are, and the judge seemed to side with the defense on this and say, yeah, we're going to need more information on that communication. It needs to be provided to the defense. We will see whether or not that's actually introduced in court in January.
Sam Brock, thank you so much for being on top of that for us. Appreciate it. Coming up, disgraced crypto darling Sam Bankman-Fried, you know, SBF. He's saying he'll testify under oath about why his company had such an epic collapse. We'll tell you what lawmakers want to know. Plus, Taylor Swift apparently has a new project, what we know about her movie plans in the 5 things. The controversial founder of that FTX crypto exchange, Sam Bankman-Fried, says, yes, he will show up in front of a congressional committee next week. SBF, as he's called, announced this decision today on Twitter, where he again apologized for the epic meltdown of FTX. He said he's going to try to be helpful during the hearing and, in his words, shed light on the company, on customers, talk about how to get value back, money back to users internationally, share what he thinks led to the crash, and then talk about, he says, his own failings. Remember, this collapse, the current person who's in charge now of FTX to try to rebuild it, try to get, not even rebuild it, get people's money back, says this was worse than Enron. This is an exchange that went from something like $35 billion to bankrupt in less than a week. Kate Rooney is joining us now. Kate, it's interesting. Sam Bankman-Fried, we've talked about this. I've talked about this with your colleagues. He's been on this kind of media tour over the last couple of weeks, kind of going up, being super duper public. A congressional hearing is different. It just is, especially with federal prosecutors investigating this collapse. It feels like lawmakers from my perch in Washington are candidly like kind of licking their chops at the chance to put SBF on the hot seat here.
No, Hallie, you're completely right. This is different, and it's the first time we're going to hear from the former FTX CEO about this bankruptcy under oath. So that's key. It's different from his recent media blitz. The stakes are a lot higher here. He's got to think about things.
You can say anything you want to you, Kate Rooney, right? Like somebody can say anything you want to, like, whatever, whatever paper. It's different in Congress.
Completely. He's got to think about perjury. And he's given, so far, hours of these media interviews. But it's different. The stakes are just much higher here. And this is someone, for context, who's appeared in front of Congress before. But at the time, he was more of an expert witness. He was the credible face of the industry and the crypto industry overall. The tables have certainly turned, so lawmakers really want answers here. And from the tone of what they're saying so far, they seem to be excited for some of this questioning. I have been talking to legal experts who say that he will likely testify remotely from the Bahamas, where he's been since the bankruptcy started playing out, because of the possibility of an arrest. Although others say the DOJ, which is investigating FTX, still needs some time to build a case. They want to collect proper evidence. There may not be as much of a rush on making an arrest, but we do expect to see him over Zoom or over some sort of video platform. And those I'm talking to on the legal side are still really puzzled about why he's speaking out and if he should be talking at all. And he really has the option to plead the fifth. He doesn't have to testify. He's doing this voluntarily. Even a sort of half-baked explanation of what happened, which is what we've really gotten in a lot of these interviews, appears to be a strategy to sway public opinion, prove the point in his mind that he didn't intend to defraud investors. So it does seem very calculated at this point based on what experts are telling me. And no surprise that Congress is taking an active interest here. It's absolutely under their purview to be questioning him. FTX has impacted American citizens, and then globally it's got more than 1 million creditors. There's more than 130 companies and affiliated companies involved here. One of the biggest corporate bankruptcies in history. So it'll be a busy week next week.
What do you think the biggest question lawmakers will have for him? Like, what do you think the one thing will be that they want to hear from him?
I think it's where's the money is the first part of it. Where did it go? And I think that we just haven't gotten a solid answer to that. It's been all about margin, and I think he's had a way of tiptoeing around really what actually happened here and where the money is. And then the other part of it is around intent, although I think there's also questions about his role in Washington, some of his funding. But I think number one and number two, where is the money? And did you know what was going on at FTX? So those would be my top questions.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Those would be your two questions, mine too. Thank you very much, Kate from CNBC. I know we'll be chatting, I'm sure, more next week when this all goes down. Appreciate it.
Exactly.
Now to a story first to NBC News. Some Democrats in Congress now accusing big oil companies of doing things that could doom global efforts when it comes to climate change. Their words. This new report from Democrats on the House Oversight Committee says companies like Chevron, Exxon, et cetera, only paid lip service to investments in renewable energy while raking in record profits. I sat down with Congressman Ro Khanna, one of the Democrats on that committee, before this report dropped. Here's part of our conversation on what he describes as big oil's climate misinformation crisis. Major players in the oil industry accused of greenwashing their public image with clean energy pledges, according to a new report just released by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. Internal documents obtained and interpreted by the committee suggest BP, Chevron, Shell, ExxonMobil, and the American Petroleum Institute are, in lawmakers' view, not taking the necessary steps to move away from fossil fuels, despite making public climate pledges. Talk to me about what you think is the most important thing people should know about your findings.
Hallie, we can't solve the climate crisis if we don't solve the climate misinformation crisis. And these hearings, 2 years where we had the big oil CEOs testifying for the first time in front of Congress, exposed that big oil has been misleading the American public.
The report finding oil and gas execs knew that what they were doing would not meaningfully reduce emissions and kept aggressively investing in fossil fuels. In one instance, the report says Chevron boasted of a $200 billion return in the next 40 years after upscaling oil production off the Australian coast.
They are actually increasing their carbon emissions. The internal documents show that they believe that this is a license to continue the status quo, to entrench the fossil fuel industry while claiming something totally different.
NBC News reached out for comment to the companies named in the final report. They have yet to respond.
Plans through 2025 are consistent with the goals of the Paris Agreement.
At a committee hearing last year, executives from several oil companies listed the steps they've taken to invest in clean energy and decrease carbon emissions.
By 2025, we aim to grow our low-carbon investments to $3 to $4 billion per year.
And they outright denied any allegations they mislead the public.
Any suggestion that Chevron is engaged in an effort to spread disinformation and mislead the public on these complex issues is simply wrong.
ExxonMobil has long recognized that climate change is real and poses serious risks. But there are no easy answers.
These companies have pushed back on some of the claims that are reflected here in this final report.
Well, I'm sure they're talking about it because they know it's good PR. But as the documents show, they're working to have lobbyists kill climate legislation. But they can't have it both ways. They can't call themselves clean companies and then commit to business plans to increase CO2 emission.
But they have not come close to producing the key internal documents.
The report also claims oil companies intentionally obstructed the investigation, with Oversight Chairwoman, Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, saying some subpoenaed documents were not sent in and that many that were heavily redacted with no explanation.
Well, none of the companies fully complied with our subpoena, so we have to continue working to get these documents.
More to come on that front. Again, to reiterate, the companies, we asked for comment on specifics from those companies, nothing yet. But Republicans on the House Oversight Committee have put out a memo criticizing the report, claiming it to be radical from the House Oversight Committee's Democrats. Let's get you over to the 5 things now our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the former Minneapolis police officer who kneeled on George Floyd's back while another officer kneeled on his neck has now been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison today. We're talking about Alexander King, who pleaded guilty to one state charge of aiding and abetting a second-degree manslaughter earlier this year. He's already serving a federal sentence for violating Floyd's civil rights. Both those sentences will be served at the same time. Number 2, the FBI is looking into bullet shell casings found at the scene of a shooting at a North Carolina power substation. You know this. We talked about it last week a ton. It wiped out power for thousands of people. That's according to a law enforcement memo reviewed by NBC News. They're also looking at casings found at a different shooting at a hydro facility in South Carolina. The FBI apparently has not determined whether those shootings are connected or figured out a motive for either one, according to this memo. Number 3, people in South Korea are about to get a year or 2 younger. What does that mean? Well, a lot of folks there go by their Korean age, which means a person is 1 year old as soon as they are born. 1 year old, rather. They get 1 year every New Year's Day. So if somebody's born on December 31st, they'd be considered 2 years old the next day. The country's parliament passed a set of bills that will now count a person's age based on their birthday, set to go into effect in June. Number 4, Taylor Swift, taking her talents to the big screen. She's going to be making her feature directorial debut with Searchlight Pictures. That's it. That's all we know. Like, I wish I could tell you more about the plot or the cast. I don't know. Nobody does. We do think that Swift has already written a script, according to some reports. Number 5, an anonymous buyer paid more than $6 million for a 76-million-year-old T-Rex skull at an auction in New York today. Maybe that sounds like a lot, but the auction house thought it would get between $15 and $20 million. It's a skull steel, folks. It weighs 200 pounds, found during excavations over the past couple of years. When we come back, tech companies have laid off tens of thousands of people this year. We'll talk about what that means for the industry and what to do if you yourself end up scrambling for a new job. Next up in our original. So tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. And tonight, it's tech companies laying off workers by the thousands, right? Last month alone, more than 50,000 of them lost their jobs. And you know that can mean a ton of stress for people who are now looking for something else to do as their careers. Like for some visa holders, for example, the move creates a lot of uncertainty around whether they'll be deported. One study says layoffs could even increase the odds of suicides. Maura Barrett has the story.
Jared Olivas has been steeped in the world of tech his entire life.
I was born and raised in Silicon Valley, so I've always been drawn to the tech industry.
After working in the field for 5 years, he was happy and comfortable as a manager at a software company.
The job security seemed impenetrable.
For most of this year, Jared's DMs and inbox have been full of recruiters offering him higher salaries and bigger titles.
July, August, I think the economy started to turn and you stop seeing as much offers going out and less activity. And then in October, we were seeing like a total nosedive.
Jared became one of the thousands of unemployed tech workers in October when the company announced budget-related layoffs. He was laid off over Zoom and given 2 months severance.
I think in the back of my mind, I'm calculating all my finances and making sure, like, do I have enough runway, to pay my bills, my rent, food. You're planning for the worst.
According to crowdsourced website layoffs.fyi, over 140,000 tech employees have been laid off this year. Just in the past month, Meta, Amazon, Cisco, and Twitter each laid off thousands of employees.
What advice do you have to people that might have been recently laid off?
First, take a moment to pause, gather your thoughts, and think about your next pivot for your career. What type of opportunity is going to help enhance your skill set and make you the most marketable? Second, you've got to get your resume in order. And third, you really do need to think about your online network and your in-person network.
Megan Slabinski is a district president with Robert Half, a human resources consulting firm.
Is there a negative connotation when people are looking at someone that might have been laid off from a previous job?
I think it's important to be able to own the narrative and explain the circumstances surrounding your separation, whether it was your choice or your employer's choice, or if there was really no choice at all. But owning the narrative around your separation is really important.
After the layoff, Jared was comforted that his fiancée still had a job. But he's in the tech industry too. And now his company also announced impending layoffs.
I think they were trying to be nice, but a lot of anxiety was caused by that. For me, myself included, especially just what recently happened with Jared. I'm kind of a little nervous to know what's to happen in a couple weeks.
The stress only compounding in an industry not known for its mental health support.
I think one thing that people do, especially in tech, is we don't like to usually broadcast when we're not doing well. Tech workers, I typically don't think would broadcast if they're suffering, and they'll suffer in silence, unfortunately.
But the reality is he's not alone. And as the economy struggles to stabilize in a post-pandemic world, there are likely many more layoffs to come.
I'm 100% hopeful for the future. I definitely think the economy is going to rebound, and I think the tech industry will boom again.
Look, Hallie, it might be hard for some people to watch this and feel sympathy for highly paid, young, intelligent professionals in a competitive industry like tech, where there still is a lot of opportunity. But the reality is we're seeing this in more than just the tech industry. There likely will be more layoffs across multiple industries after the holidays. But something that's important to note, according to a Challenger Gray and Christmas report, the total number of layoffs this year is just the second lowest annually since 1993. Think about the rockiness the economy has seen since then, comparatively. And remember, as our expert noted in the piece, a layoff is likely not a reflection of you as an employee. Hallie?
Our thanks to Mar Barrett for that reporting. Coming up here on the show, the Coast Guard looking for a snorkeler in Hawaii, missing after potential shark attack. What her husband says happened, coming up next in The Local. So if you're even like a vaguely somewhat online person, you've probably been seeing on your feeds lately your friends posting these like gorgeous avatar-looking pictures or fantasy-looking or anime-looking pictures of themselves generated on a photo editing app. It's called Lensa. There's a feature on it you can use to get this stuff. Costs like a couple bucks for these very, very artsy pictures. But now, with this exploding in popularity, you've got some folks raising concerns about privacy, saying the app might be able to keep your photos even though it says it doesn't. And there's a question of whether other private data could be being collected as well. There are also artists out there who say the app is actually stealing artistic styles from people who originally created them. Lensa's parent company, Prisma Labs, is pushing back on that, tweeting that AI, these are AI-generated images, saying that AI doesn't have the same detail capabilities as people do. Joining me now is Kevin Collier. So, Kevin, like full throttle confessional here. I'm super intrigued by this. So I was like, maybe I'll download it. I don't know, because I guess the concept is you put like several of your pictures in there, and then the AI can like build you in all these different styles and ways and positions, et cetera. And that's how it works, right? That's what's raising the privacy concerns, though, is because you're uploading maybe a dozen selfies to get this stuff.
Right. I think whenever you want to talk about a new app that's going to take your data and then what's going to, there is no meaningful privacy law in the United States. In contrast to, say, Europe or the UK, where stuff like that is strictly regulated, there are terms of service here that says it's going to protect some of this. But by and large, it's wild, wild west out there. And then secondly, we're talking about facial recognition as it's still a very emerging, burgeoning technology. There's, countless concerns with it, what it's going to be used for down the line. And so we have no guarantees.
I feel like some of the sensibility is like, well, so what? This looks like you're looking at these selfies, these images that have been created that NBC's cleared to be able to use, and you're like, wow, this is like so cool. This is so interesting. But then there's the artist piece of it too. Like some of these people who make similar kinds of art, who actually make it themselves, are like, wait a minute, it's copyright, but that's tricky because this is content made from an algorithm, basically, or AI, I should say.
Right. All this AI, it's not coming up with new stuff on its own. It's reinterpreting stuff based on what it can find to build a kind of a backlog to start with, a library to start with, and that is trained on existing art. And so kind of crucially, like we've seen here, there have been multiple artists who say that their art has been used by this program and their signature has been obscured. Like the program is cropping them out of their own works.
What's the way that they can find some sort of recourse on that front? Is there one?
Well, legally speaking, there's copyright and the internet keep bumping up against each other pretty frequently, and it's usually determined in the courts. And there has yet to be a substantial AI copyright art case. When there is one, and surely it seems like there will be one, we'll get much better insight then, but until then, it's a waiting game.
Kevin Collier, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Western Bureau, the Coast Guard and other first responders are looking for a woman who went missing while snorkeling in Hawaii yesterday. Police say the woman's husband called 911 about 24 hours ago, saying he couldn't find his wife and that he'd seen a shark swim by a bunch of times when they were like 50 yards offshore. There have been 6 recorded shark incidents in Hawaii this year, according to state data, so the search on that front continues. Out of our Midwest Bureau, Iowa officials say they found no evidence to back up a woman's claims that her late father was a serial killer. Officials had excavated an area where the woman said bodies were buried, but didn't find anything over the course of this 3-day investigation. The woman is standing by her claims. Her sister says accusations against their father are, in her words, absolutely not true. And from our Western Bureau, LA County animal officials say a girl sent them this letter. I love this story, asking for permission to keep a unicorn in her backyard if she could find one. So the people in LA were like so touched by this. They're like, you know what, girl? Yes, absolutely. As long as you give it access to sunlight and moonbeams and rainbows and give it watermelon once a week. They gave her this little stuffy here, this little unicorn, until she finds a real one along with a heart-shaped license tag. It is so sweet. They say that, you know, they were so touched to get something like this, they figured keep the dream alive, keep the magic alive, and let her keep a unicorn in the backyard. She responsibly wrote in, why not? Still to come. We're talking with a filmmaker who traveled the country to look at the impact of student loan debt on people's lives and the lengths some folks go to try to pay them off. That's coming up in our backstory. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight you've got the FCC now putting a stop to some tens of millions of fraudulent robocalls about student loan relief services. Basically, the agency is now blocking all U.S. companies from taking calls from one small communications business that's accused of being at the center of it all. So maybe you won't get quite as many calls from people saying they can help you with your student loans, because it seems like everybody is talking about student loans, right? People are struggling under the weight of that debt. And there's this new film out, this new documentary coming out on MSNBC on Sunday, taking a look at the real impact that this debt crisis is having on people and the lengths that some folks have to go to just to keep their head above water financially. Lone Wolves follows filmmaker Blake Zeff as he travels across the country, talking with people who say this debt really is hard to keep up with. Blake Zeff is joining us now. Blake, thank you so much for being on the show. And on this segment specifically, which really is a look behind the curtain, right? Behind the scenes. That's the intention of reporters, or in this case, a documentary filmmaker like you, talking about, like, how did this happen? I was so intrigued at how you and your wife were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because of student loans. At what point, Blake, did you decide, okay, there's a documentary in this. I'm going to go talk to more people about this. Like, was there a tipping point for you?
There was. There were really two main points at which I thought this is just insane. The first was, my wife went to college and then she went to grad school because she wanted to be a psychologist to help veterans with PTSD. So that was really her focus. And eventually the student debt was so out of control. It was about $200,000. We were paying around $2,000 a month that she wasn't even able to stay at the VA because she wasn't able to afford to stay there to keep up with her payments. So that was kind of part number one. And I thought, well, if this is happening to us, there's got to be a lot of people out there who are experiencing the same thing. And there's 45 million people in America who have student debt. So it's really, really widespread. The second thing I would say is there was a little provision in 1998. Someone snuck in a 2-line provision into a very, very big bill that said, that basically stripped away basic consumer protections for student loans. And so I was going to talk to that person, that politician, and say, look at what's happened a couple of decades later. Do you have second thoughts about this? That this provision you did? Well, the problem was no one would cop to it. No one admitted that they were the ones behind that provision. And so then suddenly I realized we have a whodunit on our hands. And that's when I realized this is not an article. This is a movie.
Yeah, this is way more than that. And to create a movie, you need characters, right? You need people. You talk to a bunch of people about dealing with what student loan debt looks like, right? One person who comes to mind is Marcella, this person you introduced us to, who basically makes like erotic videos to help pay off her student loan debt. How did you find people? What was your process for finding people like Marcella to talk about this, the research to bring home the idea you're trying to get across?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of come from all over the place. This is such a widespread problem that you really do hear. I mean, from social media, Marcella, for example, yes, this mom who is doing these, erotic videos that she's selling online just to help her daughter pay down her student debt. We found out about her, online. There was another person who was a doctor who, there was an op-ed in the New York Times with the headline, "I'm a doctor and even I can't afford to pay my student loans." And so I reached out to the person who wrote that and he said, "You don't want to talk to me, you want to talk to my wife, whose story is even crazier." So, from the newspaper, from social media, the real story here is that everyone knows someone who is struggling with student loans. When you have 45 million people dealing with this, it's either someone you know or yourself or someone you're related to or someone who lives right next door to you. These stories are everywhere, Hallie.
You spent years working on this, including, of course, some time over the pandemic. How did that affect the project?
Yes, this was really interesting. There was one guy named Scott who's a teacher, and he was the first in his family to go to college, and he achieved his dream. He wanted to be a teacher, and he did that. The problem was when he had his, he had to pay for a master's degree in order to do that, and he wasn't getting paid that much as a teacher. And so eventually his debt just ballooned and ballooned, because if you don't hit those payments right away, they'll raise the interest on you and it'll get out of control. And so he was having some really, really hard times with this. And we wanted to do an interview with him and really kind of come to see him in his home environment and follow him around. The problem was with COVID, I couldn't leave my house, and neither could he really. So what we did was, and it was really interesting, he said to me, I'm living with my 19-year-old son right now, and he's an aspiring photographer. So when I heard that, a light bulb went off in my head. We got a professional TV film camera equipment to him. We sent it to them, and that's him right there. You can see him. His name's Elijah. He's 19 years old. We taught him how to use the equipment over the phone, and then I would use FaceTime and Zoom, kind of like this, to see the shots that he was setting up and to talk to him about it. And he did a beautiful job. Some of the best shot material in the film, I think, is done by this 19-year-old Elijah Naylor. It was really incredible.
Blake, Steph, thank you so much for taking us behind the scenes of how this came together. We so appreciate it. We want to let folks know that Lone Wolves will be on Sunday night, 10 Eastern on MSNBC. You'll also be able to stream it on Peacock. That does it for us this hour. Have a great weekend. We'll have more for you here Monday, same time, same place. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.